Sabah ol Harry. Good morning,
Sabah.
everyone. And this is where my Arabic finish. Uh, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I am Maurizio Lunati from the Niguarda Teaching Hospital of Milan, Italy, and I am here just to introduce you this course. Unfortunately, I'm not without you, and this is really a pity, but as you know, there is a dramatic situation with the virus outbreak in Italy, and so unfortunately I'm here. 1 month ago, when I prepared the meeting, I took my travel book on the Egypt. I will have the pleasure to visit Egypt next time. Let's hope so. So, I have been given the privilege and the honor to share in Cardio Egypt and the ERA device course in Egypt, and I wish to introduce you to this educational program, which we have tried to build in order to enhance device knowledge and improve the service you provide to patients. As you will see from the agenda, we will have a full 3-day course program on cardiac pacing, on ICD defibrillators, on CRT, cardiac resynchronization therapy. You could ask, why me? Because I am a device implanter. I spent my whole career in Niguarda Hospital in the arrhythmias, electrophysiology, and the devices. And moreover, I've been in the educational committee of the ERA. ERA is the European Heart Rhythm Association, which is a branch of the European Society of Cardiology. I've been in the educational committee, I was saying, for 8 years, and I've been for 3 editions the director of the cardiac pacing, ICD and CRT device courses, which takes place yearly in Vienna and is probably the most important educational courses of ERA. So we decided between ERA and Egypt to try to find something together, and this is the first or the second experience. I really hope that it will work. As a physician, as a customer, I know that there will be many technicians speaking to you on the characteristics of different devices, and as an educator, I wish to help you to be ready for the challenges of tomorrow. ERA and myself strongly believe that education is a foundation for a better future, and you are the future. So enjoy the meeting and hopefully take profit for what myself and the other colleagues will tell you about devices. I think that we could surely start if you are okay with everything, if you can hear me and see what I presented. My first presentation. Okay, is it okay for you?
Yes. Yes.
I start. Obviously, please feel free to interrupt me whenever you have some problems, because I'm here for you. Okay?
Okay.
Okay. So, my first presentation will deal about the pacemaker timing in single and dual chamber devices. These are really the fundamentals of cardiac pacing. I know that it's quite boring and it's not so easy, but it's extremely important that everyone knows everything about these fundamentals. This will be my agenda: general aspects, single chamber devices, dual chamber devices, timing intervals, upper rate behavior, and miscellaneous. As you all know, this is the NBG code. NBG is the acronym for NASP and British Generic Code, and that was the opportunity to identify every device according to 3 letters. In the first letter is the chamber paste, which could be the atrium, the ventricle, or both. In the second letter is the chamber sensed, which may be the atrium, the ventricle, or dual. The third letter is the response to sensing, which can be none, which can be triggered, which can be inhibited, which can be dual. After the first three letters, we have a fourth letters, which identifies rate modulation, and the 5 for multi-site pacing. Let's see some examples of what I said. We have, grossly speaking, two modes of pacing, which is asynchronous pacing mode, which was in the first era of pacing. Asynchronous pacing means permanent pacing at the programmed rate. The advantage is ensures a fixed cardiac rhythm. The disadvantage is no sensing of spontaneous cardiac events. And the letters which identify asynchronous pacing are A00 or V00. But now we have more modern devices, which are on-demand devices. And the principle are that if the patient doesn't have a spontaneous rhythm, permanent pacing will ensue at the programmed rate. When spontaneous rhythm is lower than programmed rate, permanent pacing. When spontaneous intrinsic rhythm is higher than programmed rate, there will be inhibition of pacemaker. The advantages of this mode of pacing are obviously no competition with the spontaneous rhythm. And the letters that identifies these devices are AAI for atrial pacing, VVI for ventricular pacing, GDD for dual chamber pacing. Is it okay?
Yes, it's okay.
Okay, let's go on. Another more important thing is that you and everybody should know is that every manufacturer has a specific set of markers that reflect the device behavior. And this is truly important in order to have a perfect understanding of the operation that the device is performing. Let's see some examples. Here we are the electrocardiogram, the electrogram, and the markers. AP means atrial pacing, VP means ventricular pacing, and so on. And 1000 is the cycle length. And in this case, we will have atrial sensing and ventricular sensing, atrial sensing and ventricular sensing. So, beyond the electrocardiogram, when we interrogate the devices, we can see the markers and understand how the pacemaker works and if it works well or not. Another important thing that I think that everybody should know is how to convert rates to intervals and vice versa. Rate reflects the frequency of the heart, the beats per minute, and the intervals reflect the length, the distance between the beats, and is expressed in milliseconds. Let's make one example. If we have a rate of 100 beats per minute, the interval can be simply simply dividing 60,000 by 100 bits, and this is 600 milliseconds. And the same is true for vice versa. If we have intervals and we want rate, we divide this number, which is always 60,000, by 500 milliseconds, and we will have 120 beats per minute. This is the first mode of pacing, VVI pacing, the chamber paced, the chamber sense, and the mode of functioning of the device, inhibited. The lead is in the ventricle. You can see the chest X-ray with the device and the catheter, which is put in the apical portion of the right ventricle. And this is a small example of how an electrocardiogram can be of ventricular pacing. We have 2 beats preceded by spikes, a spontaneous beat, and the pacemaker is inhibited, and the relapse of a new ventricular pacing beat. These are the timing cycles of a single chamber pacing. We are talking of ventricular pacing. I want to remember that the first letter V means the chamber paced, the second letter is the chamber sensed, the third letter is the response to sensing. So we have spontaneous intrinsic beat, escape interval, ventricular pacing beat, escape interval, ventricular escaping beat. Now we have 2 spontaneous beats, and after the designed escape interval, there will be again a ventricular beat. And this is once more the example of the correct working of a VVI pacing. Pacing, pacing, inhibition, inhibition, ventricular ectopic beat, and again ventricular pacing. What is the rate adaptive pacing? As you know, the pacemaker beats with its own frequency, which is fixed. It may be 60 or 70 or 80 or 90 beats per minute. But in order to increase the rate of a pacemaker, if a patient doesn't have an intrinsic rhythm, we can have some sensors, impedance, ports, capacitance, according to which, with the algorithm, there is the possibility to convert the sensor data to heart rate. And so we have devices which can accelerate through exercise and decelerate when the patient is still resting. And this really is a new way to pace the patient, which works very well. And this is an example of VVIR pacing, so ventricular pacing with the rate response mode. Now the device paces at a rate of 50, more or less, and with the sensor, the device can give more beats to the patient, and now the rate is around 100 per minute. Is it okay?
Yes.
Good. Let's go. What is V00 pacing, the asynchronous mode of pacing? This was the first mode of pacing which appeared when the pacemaker was developed. This mode of pacing is very good if the patient doesn't have intrinsic beat. Because if the patient has intrinsic beat, there could be a conflict with the pacing, and there could be disaster, such in these cases. Intrinsic rhythm, V00 asynchronous pacing, ROT of a ventricular beat, and a ventricular fibrillation ensues. So please do not adopt VOO pacing practically never. This is the second mode of pacing, the pacing of the atria. We have the catheter, the lead in the right atrium, and you can see the chestic tray with the device in the right part of the upper portion of the thorax, and the lead which is in the right atrial appendage. This is the atrial lead. And we have, you can see on the electrocardiogram how this system works. The P is paced by the pacemaker. The QRS is a spontaneous intrinsic ventricular beat. And this is another example: sinus rhythm, P wave, QRS, Q wave, QRS, atrial beat induced by atrial pacing, spontaneous QRS, and so on. And this is the AAI rate responsive pacing, which is more or less the same as we saw with the VVIR pacemaker. That is, the patient at rest has an heart rate of 50. The patient during exercise, through the algorithm and the sensor, can increase his heart rate, and in this moment the heart rate of the patient induced by atrial pacing is 100 beats per minute. This is the most complex, obviously the most effective pacing, which is the pacing. We have the possibility to have two leads, one in the atrium, in the ventricle, and a device which accomplishes the possibility to sense and pace both chambers, atria and ventricle. So we'll have, So we'll have three possibilities. The atrioventricular sequential pacing, both atrium and ventricle are paced. We can have ventricular atrial triggered pacing, it is to say atrial sense and ventricular paced. We can have atrial pacing with intrinsic conduction. And these three possibilities may occur every time in the patient. Which are the timing cycle of this mode of pacing, dual chamber pacing? We can have many possibilities. We have here a spontaneous atrial beat, a spontaneous ventricular beat, so this is normal sinus rhythm. Now we don't have a P wave, there is a pacing of atrium and subsequent evidence of QRS spontaneous. We have again a spontaneous intrinsic atrial rhythm, followed by an AV, after an AV interval, by ventricular pacing, and pacing of the atrium and pacing of the ventricle. And this is another example of DDP pacing. We have atrium and ventricular pacing, atrium and ventricular pacing, atrium inhibited and ventricular pacing. What are the refractory periods? We should know that there are two extremely important refractory periods in the timing cycle of a device. We have an absolute refractory period, also known as blanking, which takes part in the initial portion of the refractory period. This is the absolute refractory period. Every signal which appears in this time will not be detected. What does this mean? That in this period of time, the sensing channel is not active. Obviously, this is extremely important because it forced the pacemaker to blind in one or in both chambers after a pacing impulse, avoiding two things that could be very dangerous, which are the crosstalk and the far field oversensing. And the other important refractory period is what we call the relative refractory period, which is longer than the absolute refractory period. And in this time, signals will be seen, but they will not reset time. What is the use of this relative refractory period? That it forced the pacemaker not to react to unwanted intrinsic signals that could be T waves and retrograde T waves. What you should remember of the device correct working are the time intervals, and the fundamental intervals which everyone should know are four. LRI, which is the lower rate interval. We will see examples afterwards. VRP, which is the ventricular refractory period. AV, which is the atrioventricular interval. And PVART, which is the postventricular atrial refractory period. These are the four more important fundamental intervals. But we have also derived intervals, which are the TARP, total atrial refractory period, which is the sum of AV interval and the postventricular atrial refractory period. Why is this so important? Because it defines the upper rate interval, the maximum rate that the device could reach in a double chamber mode. And another derived interval is the atrial escape interval, which is the lower rate interval minus the AV interval. So, fundamental time physical 1. Lower rate interval. Lower rate interval is the longest interval between a paced or a sensed ventricular event and sustained ventricular pace event without intervening sensed event. This is the lower rate interval, the distance between a ventricular pace and another ventricular pace. Second, the second fundamental time insight is the ventricular refractory period, which is from the beginning of a ventricular event and lasts around 300 milliseconds. Intervals initiated by ventricular event during which a lower rate interval cannot be initiated. Nothing could be sensed in this ventricular refractory period. 3. Fundamental timing cycle 3. The atrioventricular interval, which is what in the electrocardiogram is the distance between the P wave and the QRS. We could have atrial sense and ventricular pace, or atrial pace and ventricular pace, or atrial pace and ventricular sense. And the distance between the atrial and the ventricle is the AV interval, which could be after a second event in this case, or after a paced event in these other cases. What is derived from the 3 fundamental timing cycle is the concept of atrial escape interval, AEI. AEI is the lowest rate interval minus the AE interval. 4. The postventricular refractory period. What is the postventricular refractory period? Is the interval after a ventricular paced or sensed event during which a natural event cannot initiate a new AV interval. Is the distance between the atrial pace and the end of the T wave. It's extremely important because with the post-ventricular atrial refractory period, we could avoid the inappropriate atrial sensing of ventricular events. We could eliminate sensing of retrograde P waves from ventricular conduction. And derived from the post-ventricular atrial refractory period is the last timing cycle, which is the total atrial refractory period, which is AV interval plus post-ventricular atrial refractory period. Let's see some examples which can give us the opportunity to understand how the pacemaker works and how it avoids disasters. Can you give me an interpretation of this electrocardiogram? And then I will try to explain what is the PPAP for. We have both pacing of atrium and ventricles. Can you see it? We can have pacing of the atrium or the ventricle. We have an atrial spike, but there is no P wave and ventricular pacing. We have atrial spike, no P wave, ventricular pacing, and again. What happens here? What happens is the so-called pacemaker-mediated tachycardia. That is, ventricular pacing lead to a ventricular atrial conduction. The atrial beat trigger ventricular beat, and so it starts a supraventricular tachycardia, which is completely started by the pacemaker. And this is the name of this tachycardia, endless loop tachycardia, which is a circus movement tachycardia. The anterograde limb is the AV delay, the retrograde limb is the ventricular conduction. Which are the events in which an endless loop tachycardia could ensue? Ventricular extrasystole with ventricular atrial conduction, loss of atrial capture as we saw in the previous example, atrial oversensing, atrial extrasystole, intermittent loss of atrial sensing. In all these possibilities, there could start an endless loop tachycardia, as the name is clearly indicates, endless means without an end. So it's a very bad situation. How to deal with it? Every new device has a specific algorithm, which is called the pacemaker tachycardia intervention. Like in this case, there is an automatic prolongation of the postventricular atrial refractory period. The single P wave is not conducted and the tachycardia fortunately stops. So, just to summarize, these are the 4 timing intervals that works. As you can see, it's very difficult, very complicated, but you should understand what it works, because obviously, if something goes wrong, you should understand what is the problem looking at all these evidences. We have the lower rate interval, the ventricular refractory period, the postventricular atrial refractory period, the AV interval. Understanding what happens with the use of the markers and with the use of these evidences, we can appreciate if the device works well or not. What is the upper rate behavior? Upper rate behavior is related to a programmed upper tracking weight, which we can program after the implant or during the follow-up. We should know what is the sense of total atrial refractory period is the sum of AV delay and postventricular atrial refractory period. The sum of AV delay and of post-ventricular rupture refractory period defines the maximum up tracking rates. What does this mean? In order to avoid too high frequencies during a natural tachyarrhythmia, the pacemaker has to stop the upper rate behavior, and the upper tracking rate is the rate over which the pacemaker can go. And this is an example of upper tracking rate. At this rate, one is it falls in the refractory period, and it doesn't give rise to new ventricular pacing. So, this is obviously useful to avoid the high rate for patients with a natural arrhythmia, but is extremely dangerous because if a patient is making an effort, he can go from a rate of 100 to a rate of 50, which could be obviously really dangerous and not very good for him. In order to avoid this fall from 1 to 1 to 2 to 1, the manufacturer developed a system which gives a so-called back-to-back period before the appearance of 2 to 1 pacing block. And this is an evidence. Patient is rate, and there is a weak behavior before reaching the upper tract limit. One of my last slides. What is automatic mode switching? If a patient during his life has a relapse of atrial fibrillation and we don't want that the patient has a high rate due to the issue of this atrial arrhythmia, the device switches from a tracking mode, DDT, to tracking mode, DDI, at the start of an atrial arrhythmia. If the automatic mode switching was not on, obviously the patient could have this heart rate instead of this, and this could be really a bad for him. Another thing that appeared more recently is the possibility to manage ventricular pacing. The device continues to switch from AAI pacing, which is physiological pacing, to DDD when it's necessary, and only when it's necessary. What does this mean? That if a patient has a sinus rhythm with a normal AV conduction, the pacemaker works only in pacing the atrium. If the patient has an AV block, the device reverts to DDD mode. As you all know, ventricular pacing is not a good thing for patients because ventricular pacing is not physiological. And so, or we could avoid ventricular pacing, and this algorithm is very effective in this, we can get a good situation for the patient. This is my last slide. These are two books. One is produced by ERA and has been written by Aram Puri, Jean-Claude Desarreau, and Carsten Israel, and it talks of pacemaker and CRT troubleshooting. And the other, which is an older book published by Barold, gives you really extremely interesting things in cardiac pacemaker step by step. Well, I have terminated my first presentation. I want to thank you very much for your very kind attention. And obviously, if there are questions, I will be more than happy to give you answers. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Professor Lunati, for this elegant talk. I want to ask one question. about when to adjust the upper rate interval and when to adjust the rate at which 2-to-1 conduction occurs, and when to adjust the rate at which the automatic mode switch occurs.
It's not that easy. It's a very good question. I would say that the easiest way to put the upper rate limit with the Wenckebach and 2-to-1 is to have an exercise test with the patient to verify exactly at which rate 2-to-1 block ensures, and to decrease the AV interval or to program automatic AV delay in order to give the patient the possibility to enhance his heart rate during an exercise. Also important is the opportunity to switch on, to activate the mode switch algorithm. My personal suggestion is to activate always a mode switch, because every patient, particularly older patient, can have atrial arrhythmias, and activating mode switch gives the possibility to limit the probability of a very high rate during an atrial arrhythmia. So I would suggest everybody to put on switch mode every time a device is implanted.
Another question?
Another question from Professor Dr. Hatem.
Thank you for your lecture. I will just ask why in the nominal data of pacemaker the pacing AV delay is not equal the sensing AV delay? Thank you.
Good, another good question. As you know, there is the possibility that a patient could have a good AV conduction and others in which AV conduction is not so good, as in a AV complete heart block. I would say, and I would suggest, to use a sensed AV delay every time the patient has an intrinsic AV conduction, complete, permanent, or paroxysmal, and to have AV paced delay every time the patient doesn't have intrinsic AV conduction. But the modern devices make this automatically. So it's probably not necessary every time to program sensed AV delay or paced AV delay. One thing that I could add, we will see tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, and what is extremely important is the adjusting of AV delay in patients with cardiac resynchronization therapy, because it is not that important as is the AV delay when right ventricle versus left ventricle, but it's also extremely important to adjust AV delay, and this is important to try to understand if it's better to have sensed AV delay or paced AV delay in order to have a best CRT solution. But we will see tomorrow.
Another question, please, Professor Lunetti. Would you advise to increase the AV delay to the maximum, that's to say maybe to 350 milliseconds like in St. Jude devices, in order to promote intrinsic conduction, or the prolonged AV delay would be more deleterious than RV pacing? Very good question. There are advantages and disadvantages, of course. I would suggest to prolong the AV delay in order to have intrinsic ventricular events for patients, because ventricular pacing is always deleterious. So what we can avoid in terms of ventricular pacing is a good thing for the patient. But until a determined point, I think that 220 or 300 is the longest interval which I would choose, no more than this. Thank you. Any more questions?
Thank you for your nice lecture. I have one question. Patient has dual chamber DDIR, and he has a major operation like disc prolapse or fracture. Which mode you want to switch?
Sorry,
Before
I don't-
operation and post operation.
Uh,
Have you to program the pacemaker before operation or no?
well, we are talking about the mode switch.
No, no,
Correct.
he's asking about programming of DDD or DDI, DDD devices before major surgery. What's your advice about?
How to program DDD before programmed surgery.
Major surgery, yes.
Yeah, because they
Major
make
surgery. Yeah.
excuse
Correct.
me,
Correct. Okay.
because
Yeah.
in the major surgery they make electrocautery.
Yeah.
And-
I would try to. I would suggest to adopt the simplest way, the simplest, because surgeons do not understand a lot of pacemakers. So what you can avoid is good for the patient and for them. I would suggest to program a pacemaker for a patient with a major surgery 5 or 10 beats upper than the usual rate. If a patient is being paced 60 beats per minute, I would increase him to 70 or 75 in the first phase post surgery, and then I can go back to his usual rate. But in the first part of the recovery phase, probably 5 or 10 beats are a good solution for the hemodynamic of the patients. Did I give you an adequate answer?
Do you need to ask something, Joel? No, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Lonetti.
Thank you very much, Professor Leonati. We know that we will meet tomorrow again.
Yeah, of course.
In the CRT day.
Yes. I know that I have two presentations at 3 p.m. Correct?
Tomorrow?
Yes.
Tomorrow we have 2 lectures.
2 lectures, yes, at 3 p.m.
One in the morning and one at 3 p.m. In Cairo.
One in the morning. We can see. Tomorrow is Wednesday. 1 at 8:30 and another at 3 p.m. Correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. 8:30 is CRT indication,
Yes.
and at 3 p.m. long-term challenges of
challenge.
device implantation. Okay,
Exactly.
perfect.
Okay.
Correct. Okay. So we'll see tomorrow. Have a nice day. Enjoy the rest of the meeting. And please, may I ask you to collect every feedback on the course? Because we need to know how to do things better, how to change something, how to delete something. And if you give me evidences, I could suggest ERA, Education Committee, to make the best that we can. Thanks a lot for your very kind attention. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Enjoy your day.
Next speaker will be Dr. Sherif Al-Touhi.